In the heart of London, where history and modernity blend seamlessly, stands Buckingham Palace, a symbol of tradition, power, and royalty. Outside its grand gates, tourists from all over the world gather daily to witness the iconic changing of the guard ceremony. Among these guards was Private Thomas Harrington, a young but disciplined soldier who had earned his place in the Queen's Royal Guard through years of rigorous training and unwavering dedication. Clad in the traditional red tunic and towering bearskin hat, he stood tall and motionless, embodying the essence of duty and honor. Private Harrington wasn't just another face in the line of guards. He was known among his peers for his calm demeanor and sharp focus. While others occasionally struggled with the long hours of standing still or maintaining composure in front of curious onlookers, Harrington seemed almost statue-like, as if carved out of stone. His commanding officers often praised him for his professionalism, and even fellow guards admired how he never cracked under pressure. Whether it was children waving toys in his face, people trying to make him laugh, or loud music blaring nearby, nothing could break his concentration. For Harrington, being a royal guard wasn't just a job, it was a privilege, one that came with immense responsibility. On this particular afternoon, the weather was perfect. Bright sunshine bathed the palace grounds, and a gentle breeze carried the faint scent of blooming flowers. Tourists milled about, snapping photos, pointing excitedly at the palace, and marveling at the sight of the guards. Some posed for pictures beside them, pretending to shake hands or whisper secrets into their ears. It was all part of the experience, and most guards took it in stride, knowing that their role included not only protecting the monarchy, but also serving as living symbols of British heritage. Harrington's position today was near one of the main entrances, close enough to observe the lively crowd yet far enough to maintain a sense of order. As usual, he stood perfectly still, his gloved hands clasped behind his back, his gaze fixed straight ahead. To an outsider, it might have seemed monotonous, even boring, to stand there for hours without moving. But Harrington found peace in the routine. Each breath, each blink, each subtle shift of weight was deliberate. He knew that beneath the surface of calmness lay a constant vigilance, a readiness to act should anything disrupt the sanctity of the palace or threaten those around him. The crowd that day was particularly energetic. Families laughed and chatted, couples posed for selfies, and street performers entertained passers-by with tricks and music. Amidst the cheerful chaos, a group of tourists caught Harrington's peripheral vision. They were loud, boisterous, and clearly enjoying themselves. At first, they seemed harmless enough, taking turns posing for photos with the guards and exchanging playful banter. But as the minutes ticked by, their antics grew bolder. One of them waved a scarf in front of a nearby guard, attempting to elicit a reaction. Another mimicked the guard's stiff posture, drawing laughter from the group. Though Harrington remained unfazed, something told him this wasn't going to end quietly. Little did he know, within moments, his steadfast commitment to duty would be put to the ultimate test, and the outcome would leave everyone present talking for days to come. The group of tourists causing a stir near Private Harrington consisted of 5 young adults, all in their early 20s. They were an eclectic mix. 2 guys with scruffy beards and backpacks slung over their shoulders, 3 girls wearing oversized sunglasses and brightly colored scarves wrapped around their necks. Their laughter echoed across the square as they bounced from one spot to another, clearly thrilled to be exploring London. To them, this trip was more than just a vacation. It was an adventure, a chance to create unforgettable memories. And what could be more memorable, they thought, than interacting with the famous royal guards? As they approached Private Harrington, their energy only seemed to grow. At first, their antics were harmless enough, posing for photos beside him, pretending to whisper jokes into his ear, or mimicking his rigid stance. But the lack of reaction from Harrington fueled their excitement. "Look at him," one of the boys exclaimed, nudging his friend. "He doesn't even blink. It's like he's not human." The comment sent the group into fits of giggles, and soon They began brainstorming ways to get some kind of response out of him. One of the girls stepped forward, waving her scarf dramatically in front of Harrington's face. "Hey, Mr. Guard, can you at least nod if you're alive?" she teased, her voice dripping with playful mockery. When Harrington didn't so much as twitch, the group erupted into applause, treating his stoicism like a personal challenge. Okay, said another boy, pulling out his phone to record. "Let's see how far we can push him. What's the worst that could happen?" Their tone shifted slightly, not malicious, but mischievous, driven by curiosity rather than ill intent. One of the girls suggested tying something around his hat, while another joked about attaching a note to his tunic. Then, almost casually, one of the boys said, "What if we tie him up? Just for fun, you know. Like, make him part of the show." The idea hung in the air for a moment before the group burst into laughter again, dismissing it as absurd, or so it seemed. But then, someone else chimed in. "Wait, why not? I mean, come on. Look at him. He won't even move. It'll be hilarious." The suggestion sparked a flurry of agreement, each person egging the others on until it felt less like a reckless prank and more like a game. Before anyone realized it, they had started gathering materials, a scarf here, a belt there, all while continuing to laugh and joke as though nothing unusual was happening. To the rest of the crowd, the scene must have looked surreal. Some people watched curiously, unsure whether to intervene or simply enjoy the spectacle. Others exchanged glances, sensing that the line between harmless fun and disrespect was growing thinner by the second. But the group of tourists seemed oblivious to the tension building around them. For them, this was just another lighthearted moment in a day full of adventures. Little did they know, their actions were about to spiral into something far bigger and far more serious than any of them could have imagined. As they moved closer to Harrington, looping scarves loosely around his arms and securing them behind his back, their confidence grew. They weren't thinking about the centuries-old traditions they were mocking or the weight of the uniform standing before them. All they saw was an opportunity for entertainment, a story to tell their friends back home. Yet, beneath the surface of their carefree attitudes, the seeds of trouble were already taking root. What started as playful teasing quickly escalated into something far more serious. The group of tourists, emboldened by their own laughter and the lack of immediate consequences, grew bolder with each passing moment. One of the boys, eager to take the prank to the next level, grabbed a belt from his backpack and looped it around Private Harrington's torso, securing him tightly to the lamppost behind him. "This is genius," he declared, grinning ear to ear as the others cheered him on. Another girl added her scarf to the mix, tying it loosely around Harrington's hat like some sort of makeshift decoration. At first glance, it might have seemed comical, almost theatrical. To the tourists, this was just another way to capture attention, a chance to create a funny video or photo that would rack up likes on social media. But to those watching nearby, the mood began to shift. Some bystanders exchanged uneasy glances, whispering amongst themselves about whether someone should step in. A few parents ushered their children away, sensing that the situation was veering into uncomfortable territory. Even the street performers who had been entertaining the crowd moments earlier fell silent, their instruments resting idly as they observed the unfolding scene. Private Harrington, however, remained as still as ever. His face betrayed no emotion, his posture unwavering despite being tied to the lamppost. It wasn't that he didn't feel humiliated or frustrated. He did. Every tug of the scarf, every knot pulled tighter against his uniform stung not just physically but emotionally. He knew that beneath his stoic exterior lay a simmering sense of duty and pride. The uniform he wore represented centuries of tradition, sacrifice, and honor. And yet, here he stood, reduced to what felt like a prop in someone else's game. For the tourists, the act seemed harmless enough. They weren't trying to hurt anyone, they were simply having fun. But as they stepped back to admire their handiwork, snapping photos and laughing uncontrollably, cracks began to form in their carefree facade. One of the girls hesitated, glancing at Harrington's rigid expression. "Do you think we've gone too far?" she asked quietly, though her voice was drowned out by the others' cheers. Another boy shrugged off her concern. "Relax, it's just a joke," he said, brushing aside any hint of doubt. "He'll be fine." But the atmosphere around them told a different story. The once lighthearted energy of the square had transformed into something heavier, almost tense. People who had initially chuckled at the prank now looked on with disapproval, shaking their heads or muttering under their breath. Some even began recording the scene on their phones, not because it was funny, but because they sensed it was wrong. Among the crowd, an elderly man wearing a suit approached cautiously, his tone firm but measured. "You shouldn't do this," he said to the group. "These guards are doing an important job. Show some respect." His words hung in the air, ignored by the tourists but noticed by everyone else. Meanwhile, Private Harrington continued to stand tall, refusing to give the pranksters the satisfaction of seeing him break. Inside, however, his mind raced. He knew he couldn't retaliate or show weakness. It was drilled into him during training that maintaining composure was paramount. Still, he couldn't help but wonder how long he'd have to endure this indignity. Would someone intervene? Or would the prank go unchecked, leaving him bound and humiliated in front of the world? Unbeknownst to both the tourists and the growing audience of onlookers, help was already on the way. Just beyond the palace gates, sharp eyes had spotted the commotion, and the wheels of justice were beginning to turn. What the pranksters failed to realize was that their actions hadn't just crossed a line. They had triggered a response that would come swiftly and decisively. For now, though, they remained blissfully unaware, caught up in their fleeting moment of amusement, oblivious to the storm brewing just minutes away. Weeks passed, and the incident outside Buckingham Palace became a topic of global discussion, sparking debates about respect for cultural institutions and the fine line between harmless fun and outright disrespect. For the pranksters, life had changed dramatically since that fateful day. Back in their home country, they faced intense scrutiny as their public apologies went viral. Some praised them for owning up to their mistakes, while others dismissed their statements as insincere attempts to save face. Regardless of the mixed reactions, the weight of their actions lingered over them like a shadow they couldn't escape. The group was sentenced to community service, ordered by the court to volunteer at local charities and educational programs focused on teaching young people about respect, responsibility, and cultural awareness. At first, they approached these tasks half-heartedly, still struggling to grasp the magnitude of what they had done. But as weeks turned into months, something shifted. Working alongside mentors and hearing stories from those who benefited from their efforts began to open their eyes. They started to understand that their prank hadn't just been a fleeting moment of poor judgment. It had real-world consequences, not only for themselves but also for the institution they had mocked and the countless people who held it dear. For Private Harrington, life returned to its usual rhythm, though with one notable difference. He became a symbol of resilience and professionalism. Visitors to Buckingham Palace recognized him instantly, often stopping to thank him or share kind words. Some even brought small tokens of appreciation, handwritten notes, flags, or flowers, which were handed off discreetly to palace staff. Though Harrington never acknowledged these gestures outwardly, they meant more to him than anyone could have guessed. Each act of kindness reinforced his belief in the importance of his role and reminded him why he had chosen this path in the first place. Captain Eleanor Whitmore, too, found herself reflecting on the incident. In interviews following the event, she spoke candidly about the challenges faced by members of the Royal Guard and the need for greater public understanding of their duties. "Our guards are human beings," she emphasized during one televised segment. "They feel pride, frustration, and everything in between. But above all, they embody values that transcend individual emotions. It's crucial that we honor that sacrifice." The media coverage surrounding the incident brought both criticism and praise. While some argued that the punishment for the pranksters was too lenient, others commended authorities for using the situation as an opportunity to educate rather than merely penalize. Schools across the UK incorporated discussions about the event into their curricula, encouraging students to think critically about respect, tradition, and accountability. Even international news outlets revisited the story months later, highlighting how a single act of thoughtlessness could spark meaningful conversations about cultural sensitivity. As time went on, the pranksters began to see glimmers of redemption. Their community service work earned them recognition within their own communities, and many expressed genuine remorse for their actions. One of the girls wrote an essay detailing her journey of self-reflection, which was published in a local newspaper. "I'll never forget the look on that guard's face, or the silence when we realized our joke wasn't funny anymore," she wrote. "What I learned is that traditions aren't just relics of the past. They're living symbols of unity and identity, and they deserve to be treated with care." Meanwhile, Private Harrington resumed his post outside Buckingham Palace, standing tall and unwavering as always. But there was a subtle change in the way people interacted with him. Instead of testing his resolve or treating him as part of a tourist attraction, visitors now approached him with a newfound sense of reverence. Parents reminded their children to behave respectfully, pointing out the guards as examples of discipline and dedication. Even street performers adapted their routines, incorporating themes of honor and tradition into their acts. In the end, the incident served as a turning point, not just for those directly involved, but for society at large. It underscored the delicate balance between freedom of expression and respect for shared values, reminding everyone that actions, no matter how small, carry consequences. For Private Harrington and his fellow guards, it reaffirmed their purpose. For the pranksters, it became a lesson in humility and growth. And for the world watching, it offered a chance to reflect on the importance of preserving the things that bind us together, even if they come wrapped in red tunics and bearskin hats. As the prank continued, whispers spread through the crowd like wildfire. At first, it was just a few hushed murmurs, people questioning whether this was acceptable behavior or simply harmless fun. But as the tourists tied Private Harrington to the lamppost, the murmurs grew louder, more urgent. Phones were pulled out, cameras clicked incessantly, and videos capturing every detail began flooding social media platforms in real time. The once cheerful atmosphere around Buckingham Palace had shifted dramatically, replaced by a palpable tension that rippled through the gathering spectators. Some onlookers couldn't believe what they were seeing. "Is this really happening?" One woman muttered to her husband, clutching her phone tightly as she recorded the scene. Others shook their heads in disbelief, their faces etched with disapproval. A young couple standing nearby exchanged worried glances. "They shouldn't be doing that," the man said firmly. "It's disrespectful." His partner nodded in agreement, adding, "Someone needs to stop them." But not everyone reacted with outrage. Some people chuckled nervously, unsure how to process what they were witnessing. Was this part of some elaborate performance, a staged event meant to entertain the tourists? Or was it genuine misconduct? For many, the surreal nature of the moment left them torn between amusement and discomfort. Even the palace guards stationed nearby, who typically remained impassive no matter the situation, exchanged subtle looks, their expressions unreadable but their body language hinting at unease. Amidst the confusion, a few brave individuals stepped forward, attempting to intervene. An older gentleman wearing a tweed jacket approached the group of pranksters, his voice calm but firm. "Excuse me," he said, addressing the tourists directly. "I think you've taken this far enough. Let him go." His words fell on deaf ears. The group laughed dismissively, brushing him off as if he were interrupting their private joke. Undeterred, the man tried again, raising his voice slightly. "This isn't funny anymore. You're mocking something important here." His efforts caught the attention of others nearby, who joined in voicing their concerns. A mother holding her child's hand spoke up next. "Come on, guys, let him go. This isn't right." Her tone carried a mix of frustration and concern, echoing the sentiments of those around her. Yet, despite the growing chorus of protests, the pranksters showed no signs of relenting. Instead, they doubled down, laughing louder and encouraging each other to keep going. To them, the backlash only added fuel to the fire. It made the prank feel even more daring, more thrilling. Unbeknownst to both the pranksters and the increasingly agitated crowd, help was already on its way. Just moments after the first ties were secured around Private Harrington, several police officers stationed near the palace gates noticed the commotion. Their initial curiosity quickly turned into alarm as they realized the severity of the situation. Without hesitation, they radioed for backup and began making their way toward the scene, their presence immediately commanding attention from the surrounding crowd. The ripple effect of the prank extended far beyond the immediate vicinity. As videos and photos circulated online, reactions poured in from all corners of the globe. Social media users debated fiercely about the incident, with some defending the pranksters' actions as harmless fun, and others condemning them as reckless and disrespectful. News outlets picked up snippets of footage, amplifying the story within minutes. Headlines like "Tourists Tie Royal Guard to Pole" and "Prank at Buckingham Palace Sparks Outrage" began trending, drawing even more eyes to the unfolding drama. Back at the palace gates, the situation reached a tipping point. The tourists, still oblivious to the gravity of their actions, reveled in the chaos they had created. They posed for selfies with Private Harrington, their laughter ringing out sharply against the backdrop of rising tension. Meanwhile, the crowd's disapproval grew louder, almost palpable, as murmurs turned into outright calls for intervention. Parents shielded their children's eyes, while others held up their phones, determined to document every second of the spectacle. And then, cutting through the noise, came the unmistakable sound of boots marching in unison. The arrival of reinforcements signaled the beginning of the end, but not before the pranksters would come face to face with the full weight of their actions. What started as a misguided attempt at fun was about to transform into a lesson none of them would soon forget. The incident at Buckingham Palace became one of those rare moments in history that lingered long after the headlines faded. It wasn't just a story about a group of tourists and a royal guard. It was a lesson etched into the collective memory of everyone who heard it. For Private Thomas Harrington, the ordeal transformed him from an anonymous figure in a red tunic to a symbol of quiet strength and resilience. His steadfastness during those tense minutes had inspired countless people around the world, proving that true courage often lies not in grand gestures but in unwavering commitment to duty. Every morning, as Harrington stood outside the palace gates, he noticed subtle changes in how visitors interacted with the guards. Gone were the days when tourists would wave objects in their faces or try to provoke reactions. Instead, families approached respectfully, children whispering questions to their parents about the role of the guards. Some even left heartfelt notes or small tokens near the guard booths, expressing gratitude for the sacrifices made by these men and women. One day, a young boy handed Harrington a drawing, a stick figure version of a guard standing proudly beside a lamppost. Though Harrington couldn't smile or thank him, the boy's wide grin said enough. These gestures reminded Harrington why his job mattered, not just to protect an institution, but to inspire others. For Captain Eleanor Whitmore, the incident reinforced her belief in the enduring power of tradition. She continued to lead her squad with the same precision and care, ensuring that every member understood both the weight and privilege of wearing the uniform. In interviews and public appearances, she emphasized the humanity behind the stoic facades, urging people to see the guards not as statues, but as individuals dedicated to something greater than themselves. Her words resonated deeply, sparking conversations about the importance of respecting symbols of national pride while fostering empathy for those who uphold them. As for the pranksters, their journey toward redemption was far from easy. Community service work turned out to be more transformative than any of them expected. Cleaning parks, mentoring children, and volunteering at shelters gave them a fresh perspective on responsibility and accountability. They learned firsthand how actions ripple outward, affecting lives in ways they couldn't have imagined. The girl who wrote the essay about her experience received letters from strangers thanking her for sharing her story, encouraging her to keep growing and learning. Slowly but surely, the group began rebuilding trust, not just with society but within themselves. Months later, the pranksters returned to London, not as tourists, but as participants in a cultural exchange program designed to promote understanding and respect for global traditions. Standing once again outside Buckingham Palace, they watched silently as the changing of the guard ceremony unfolded before them. This time, there were no jokes, no pranks, only reflection. As they gazed at the guards, now familiar yet still awe-inspiring, they felt a profound sense of humility. Their guide, a retired officer, shared stories about the history and significance of the Royal Guard, leaving the group visibly moved. By the end of their visit, they requested a private meeting with Captain Whitmore. Nervously, they expressed their gratitude for the lessons they had learned and apologized once more, not because they were compelled to, but because they truly meant it. Whitmore listened patiently, her expression softening slightly as she acknowledged their growth. "Mistakes are part of being human," she told them. "What matters is what you do afterward. You've taken responsibility, and that says a lot." In the years that followed, the story of the prank at Buckingham Palace became a cautionary tale, and a hopeful one. Schools used it to teach students about respect and consequences, museums included it in exhibits about modern history, and social media users revisited it whenever debates about cultural sensitivity arose. For Private Harrington, the incident solidified his place as a guardian of tradition, a role he embraced with renewed pride. And for the pranksters, it marked the beginning of a lifelong commitment to treating others and the world around them with kindness and respect. Ultimately, the story served as a reminder that mistakes can lead to growth. Humor must never come at the expense of dignity, and even the smallest acts of respect can leave lasting impressions. Whether through the unwavering stance of a single guard or the transformative journey of 5 individuals, the message was clear: tradition demands reverence, and those who protect it stand ready to defend not just a legacy, but the values it represents. The pranksters were escorted to a nearby police station, their earlier bravado replaced by a mix of fear and regret. Inside the sterile, brightly lit room, they sat hunched on hard plastic chairs, their faces pale and drawn. The reality of their actions was beginning to sink in, but it wasn't until the officers began questioning them that the full weight of the situation hit home. One by one, they were asked to explain themselves. What had motivated them? Did they understand the seriousness of their behavior and how they thought it might affect others? Their answers were disjointed, filled with nervous stammers and half-hearted apologies. "We didn't mean any harm," one of the boys repeated, his voice barely above a whisper. "We just wanted to have fun. We didn't think it would be such a big deal." Another girl chimed in, tears streaming down her face. "I thought it was funny at first, but now I realize it wasn't okay. I'm so sorry." Her words hung in the air, heavy with remorse, but the officers remained impassive, jotting down notes without offering reassurance. This wasn't about forgiveness, it was about accountability. Meanwhile, news of the incident spread like wildfire beyond the confines of the station. Social media platforms buzzed with reactions as videos and photos from the scene went viral. Comments ranged from outrage to amusement, sparking heated debates across the globe. Some defended the pranksters, arguing that they were simply young tourists having a laugh and didn't deserve harsh punishment. Others condemned their actions, calling them disrespectful and reckless, pointing out that mocking the symbol of national pride crossed a line that shouldn't be crossed. News outlets picked up the story, turning it into headlines like "Tourists Humiliate Royal Guard" and "Prank Sparks Debate Over Respect for Traditions." Back at Buckingham Palace, the atmosphere had shifted once again. While the immediate chaos had subsided, the ripple effects lingered. Tourists who had witnessed the event recounted it to friends and family, many expressing shock or disapproval. Parents used the incident as a teaching moment, explaining to their children why respect for institutions and traditions mattered. Street performers resumed their acts, but the mood felt subdued, as if everyone was collectively processing what had happened. Even the royal guards, usually stoic and unflinching, seemed to carry an air of quiet resolve, standing taller and prouder than ever before. Private Harrington, now back in formation, became something of a silent hero in the eyes of the public. Bystanders who had recorded the incident shared stories online about how he had maintained his composure throughout the ordeal, earning admiration for his professionalism and dignity. Some visitors approached him cautiously, offering words of support or simply nodding in acknowledgement. Though Harrington never responded, he couldn't, given his role. The gratitude in people's gestures spoke volumes. For many, he represented not just a soldier doing his duty, but a steadfast guardian of tradition in the face of disrespect. As the day wore on, Buckingham Palace issued an official statement addressing the incident. It praised Private Harrington and his fellow guards for their unwavering dedication and reminded the public of the importance of respecting cultural symbols. The Royal Guard is more than just a ceremonial presence. The statement read, "They are protectors of our heritage, embodying values of discipline, honor, and service. We urge all visitors to treat these individuals and the traditions they represent with the reverence they deserve." At the police station, the pranksters faced formal charges of public disorder and harassment. Officers explained the legal implications of their actions, emphasizing that their behavior had disrupted public peace and disrespected a national institution. Faced with the possibility of fines or even jail time, the group grew increasingly anxious. One of the girls buried her face in her hands, sobbing uncontrollably, while another boy stared blankly at the wall, muttering, "I can't believe this is happening." In the end, justice took its course. The pranksters were released on bail, pending further investigation, but not before being required to issue public apologies. Back at their hotel, they gathered around a laptop, drafting statements under the watchful eyes of authorities. Their words, though sincere, couldn't undo the damage they had caused. As they clicked post on social media, sharing their regrets with the world, they knew this experience would stay with them forever, a harsh lesson learned the hard way. For everyone involved, the pranksters, the crowd, the guards, and the palace staff, the day served as a powerful reminder. Traditions exist for a reason, and those who safeguard them deserve nothing less than respect. The sound of boots striking the pavement in perfect unison cut through the chaos like a thunderclap. Heads turned, cameras pivoted, and conversations halted as an entire squad of royal guardsmen appeared, marching with precision toward the scene. Led by Captain Eleanor Whitmore, a seasoned officer whose commanding presence demanded respect, the group moved with purpose, their red tunics and bearskin hats making them look larger than life. The tourists, who had been laughing and posing just moments earlier, suddenly froze, their smiles fading as they realized the gravity of what was unfolding. Captain Whitmore wasted no time. Her sharp gaze swept over the area, taking in every detail: the tied-up Private Harrington, the pranksters' smug expressions, the growing crowd of onlookers. Without hesitation, she barked orders to two of her men. "Free him," she instructed, her voice firm and authoritative. The soldiers stepped forward, quickly but carefully undoing the knots and removing the scarves and belts binding Private Harrington. As they worked, Harrington stood tall, his composure unwavering despite the humiliation he had endured. Once freed, he straightened his uniform, adjusted his hat, and returned to his post beside his fellow guards, his expression unreadable but his dignity intact. Meanwhile, Captain Whitmore positioned the rest of her squad between the pranksters and the palace gates, forming a human barrier that left no room for escape. The once boisterous tourists now looked visibly shaken, their bravado crumbling under the weight of the situation. One of the boys nervously fidgeted with his phone, while another girl clutched her scarf tightly, her earlier confidence replaced by wide-eyed apprehension. They exchanged uneasy glances, realizing too late that their harmless joke had crossed a line they hadn't anticipated. Stepping forward, Captain Whitmore addressed the group directly. Her tone was calm but laced with authority, each word carrying the weight of centuries of tradition. "Do you understand the severity of what you've done?" she asked, her piercing eyes locking onto theirs. For a moment, there was silence. Then one of the boys stammered, "We didn't mean any harm. It was just a joke." Another chimed in, their voices overlapping in a desperate attempt to explain themselves. "We thought it'd be funny. We didn't know it was such a big deal." Captain Whitmore listened silently, her expression unchanging. When they finally trailed off, she spoke again, her voice cutting through their excuses like a knife. "This is not a game," she said firmly. "These guards are here to protect the monarchy and uphold the traditions of this nation. What you did was not only disrespectful, but also illegal. You mocked something far greater than yourselves, and you will face the consequences of your actions." Her words sent a chill through the group. The tourists glanced at each other, their faces pale, their earlier laughter a distant memory. Some tried to protest weakly, insisting they hadn't meant any harm, but their arguments sounded hollow even to their own ears. Around them, the crowd murmured approvingly, many nodding in agreement with the captain's stern rebuke. Parents held their children closer, while others whispered among themselves about how justice was being served. As Captain Whitmore finished speaking, police officers arrived on the scene, having been alerted earlier by concerned bystanders. The pranksters were quickly surrounded, their carefree demeanor replaced by nervous fidgeting and muttered apologies. One of the girls began crying softly, her hands covering her face as the reality of the situation sank in. Another boy tried to reason with the officers, pleading that they didn't know and promising it wouldn't happen again. But the damage was done, and there was no turning back. For Private Harrington, standing quietly beside his comrades, the moment was surreal. He had endured countless hours of training to prepare for situations like this, but nothing could have fully prepared him for the whirlwind of emotions he felt. Humiliation, anger, relief, and pride all swirling together. As he watched the pranksters being escorted away, he couldn't help but feel a sense of vindication. His silence, his stillness, his refusal to break character, it had all been worth it. In those moments, he had embodied everything the Royal Guard represented: discipline, honor, and unwavering commitment to duty. The crowd began to disperse slowly, the tension easing as the situation came under control. Some lingered to watch the aftermath, snapping final photos or whispering about what they had witnessed. Others simply walked away, shaking their heads or muttering about the importance of respecting boundaries. As the palace gates returned to their usual calm, one thing was clear. The pranksters' reckless actions had sparked a chain reaction that would leave a lasting impression, not just on the